Hello and welcome to Deck Building 101. Today we'll be focusing on a deck that revolves around the new Investigate ability that's been enacted in the latest expansions. One of the most interesting things about this is the ability to sacrifice clues, which are an artifact, in order to obtain more cards. But triggering this effect can also buff other cards, and some also create new clues for landfall abilities and things like that. So what we're going to do is try and create one that focuses on those abilities as well as providing support. So we'll go into Deck Builder, Xbox One loading times, Bane of Existence. The swirling. Okay, here we go. So set your filter to green and white, and we'll focus on creatures. Well, no, we'll go enchantments first, because there's one specific enchantment that really helps out with this. So, it's called Ulvenwald Mysteries. Now, you can see from it, basically, whenever anything dies, you get a free clue, right? And also, whenever you sacrifice a clue, you get a free 1/1 human soldier. Now, while on its own, that isn't particularly exciting. One other card that works particularly well with that, if we go to creatures, is somewhere around here. There we go. It's Tireless Tracker. Right. Combine these two cards together, and you get quite a nice little combination going there. So basically, one generates clues, the other one also generates clues, but whenever a clue is broken, it powers up the creature. And of course, each time you break a clue, you're getting a card as well, which helps you speed up your deck. Okay, another thing that works extremely well with all the tokens that this thing produces, because of course every time you break a clue with that enchantment out, you make a 1/1 human token, is the Militia Captain. So when you get up to 4 creatures of any type, doesn't need to be tokens, that can be normal, regular, or tokens, you can flip him, and he gets a nice power buff, plus also generating his own tokens to therefore increase his power every turn. So, put a couple of those in there, that'll work well. What else do we need? Okay, go back to green, and we'll see if anything leaps out at us. Another one that's particularly good with this deck is Veteran Cathar, whatever you want to call it. Being able to trigger double strike at any time, and of course he's a nice cheap 2/2 to play as well. It's quite a nice effect. So a couple of those in there sounds good. We also want if I can find it. Green and white, of course. So, what have we got? That's what I was looking for. Now, he might be an ally, but he's basically going to be an ally mostly alone. The main benefit of him is the combination of his ability there, for the toughness is equal to number of creatures, and the fact that he's a human, so therefore any equipment that requires humans, which the majority of this deck is going to be, he will get those buffs as well. So speaking of that, we're going to change to equipment, and see what little tricks we can put in. Okay, one that's obviously going to work well. Right. One that's obviously going to work well with this deck is this, because we're focusing on creating, well, nearly every creature in the deck is going to be a human. So therefore, having so many human creatures is going to make Stoneforge Masterwork particularly nasty. Okay, and we have also Slayer's Plate, which will also work extremely well with our human-centric deck. So, have a couple of those. Also, we want a nasty little enchantment here, which is called Always Watching. If I can find it. There we go. So, it just gives all non-token creatures 1/1 and Vigilance. For 3 mana. That's pretty valuable, so we'll chuck that in there as well. Alrighty, so it's starting to shape up a bit now, so we may as well chuck in the lands. And just change it to lands so we're not here all day. Okay, so we definitely want a couple of white buffs, so as in Blighted Steps, just in case we need that life gain effect, because we're going to be producing a large number of creatures, so that will work particularly well with this. We also want our typical 2-type mana, which is very handy, and Rogue's Passage, which gives us free damage if we end up in a stalemate situation. So, we also want to round off our lands with just 8 and 8. So that'll give us 22, which is a decent base value for our number of lands. So moving on, so let's get rid of the lands. We want to continue with our creature finding. So another particularly useful one here is the early Planeswalker, Kytheon. Not because his power or damage is spectacular, but if you put a nice bit of equipment on him, you can make him an indestructible continual attacker, which is a very annoying thing for a defending player to have to deal with. Let's see, what else do we want in here? So we're not really looking for allies, but one that might work very well is a nice cheap flyer as a defense, because we don't really have any flying defense at this point. I mean, you could also focus on preventing opponents from casting non-creature spells, so if you're against a big spellcast deck, or like a counterspell deck, Veteran Wingmare will work quite well. Or you can make it a defensive deck and add in some more walls and land effects as well. But for us, we're going to concentrate on this because we got a few equipments in there. So this is a particularly nice one. 3/3 for 4 mana doesn't seem particularly impressive, but when it flips, it's a free exile ability. And also, the card doesn't come back to the battlefield, even if the Lunarch Inquisitors dies. So it is in effect just an exile, like complete exile, instead of coming back into play like one of the cheaper white enchantments. So we definitely want to have a couple of those in there. What else do we want in here? So if you want to be particularly nasty, you can have Archangel Avacyn in there as well, with a nice little trigger ability of wiping out nearly everything. Because even if they die, you're going to get a bunch of 1/1 humans anyway, so it doesn't really matter. That actually, yeah, why not? Let's chuck her in there. I haven't tried it with her in, but we'll give it a go. What else do we want in here? Okay, so we want mostly human, because You might also be able to work it out well with the werewolf side of things, because they're also humans except when they flip, so you might be able to make it a half werewolf, half human deck, and both sides will benefit from that. How many more cards do we need? Okay. So, we're going to need... that one is particularly useful because it allows you to get your creatures quicker. So we'll chuck a couple in there. So Duskwatch Recruiter, because at any time you can trigger that ability to get you some more creatures, and when he flips, all creature spells that you cast cost 1 less to cast, which of course is also beneficial, so in either form he is of use to you. So if you're going to get those kind of creatures, you want ones with bonus abilities that affect in either form. So this is another example of that. Hermit of the Natterknolls. So if they try and cast spells on your creatures during your turn, so intercepts such as fire red spells that deal damage, counter spells, boomerangs, all that kind of stuff, it'll allow you to draw more cards, which is a nice little passive ability. But when he flips, he doubles the effectiveness of that, so you get 2 cards instead. Both forms are useful and probably will be a benefit. Oh, and also, of course, he becomes a 3/5 creature, which is a nice blocker. Oh, I also forgot about those. Right. Which we can just simply adjust at this point. So, there'll be 8 white mana and 4 plain forests. Okay, so back to the actual deck creation, now that I remember a few additional things we need. So, another particularly useful one is Declaration in Stone, because often players will use as many copies of the same card to increase their effects. So, as in, for example, you might have a deck that revolves around prowess, and you might have the cheap 1/3 flyers with prowess, mixed types, red and mountains and islands. So what happens there is whenever you play one spell, all 3 of those, for example, will get +1/+1, which can be a nasty trick to play. So a way to get around this is to use Declaration in Stone, which allows you to affect all creatures with the same name. It's particularly nasty if they have more than one of any creature out. Another thing this deck needs is more flying defense, so we're going to put in a couple of Nimbus Wings. So it's a nice little buff, as well as giving you the opportunity to block flyers. So, how are our sides shaping up? We have slightly more white at the moment, so to even things out, what we can do is add in... because another one of our big problems is going to be dealing with flyers, so you might want to go with Plummet, which is a nice just instant destroy anything with flying. Another way to do it is to use Rabid Bite, so that if you have powerful creatures, so any of those creatures that have been buffed up by all your tokens or your humans, 2 mana, it's an instant destruction of anything that isn't as powerful as your creature. So, for us, I think we'll go Rabid Bite. It's very cheap, so you don't really need to worry much about it. Also, if you want to speed up your deck even more, you can use Elemental Bond, provided you've got a few higher power creatures. So a lot of the ones that power up will trigger that Elemental Bond's extra bonus draw card. For us, whatever, so we're still leaning a bit towards white, So probably want a bit more general removal, I would think, so Reprisal is always handy in that situation. So we might just chuck a couple of those in there. Reprisal is particularly useful against bigger creatures, and of course it's such a cheap spell to cast. So we've still got a few more to finish off. We definitely want one of the green Planeswalker cards, so Nissa, because of that bonus land, as well as when she flips, she's a free draw card. And also, of course, there's the end game of just creating 6/6/6 elemental creatures and swarming the board. So that's handy. We don't particularly need her other form. It is nice to put a 1/1 counter on each creature, especially if we're spawning a lot of tokens. But overall, she's probably not that useful as her other form. So we might also, so let's see what our deck breakdown is like at the moment. So fairly low and cheap. So what else do we think we need? Okay, so don't really need any of those. We're looking for more humans and more beneficial effects. Yes, if only it was a human ally creature, then it would be particularly useful. So let's destroy permanent, which isn't particularly going to help us. Ah, that was the other thing. Make a stand. Of course, all creatures gain +1/+0 isn't that great, and then you read gain indestructible. Okay, that suddenly became a lot more useful to me. Another thing we can use, because our deck is pretty much all comprised of humans, is Hope Against Hope. So another one to just power up massively whatever human creature we like. And that's basically our deck. So 60 cards, 19, 19, 22, so decent breakdown. Nice cheap cards, so speed should be quite good. And overall should be relatively effective. Let's have a look. So, speed 3, synergy 3.5, and 4 control. Strength probably needs to go up a little bit, but for a more refined version of the deck, so with a little tweaking, you can make it even more synergistic. So, but let's give this one a go and we'll see how good our starting effort is. Oh, and we better give it a name too. And there we go. Okay, now our new deck is ready to try out. Let's see how effective our little test deck is. What we want really is to play against a faster deck with a fairly decent hand, just to see the speed and effectiveness of the deck and see if it will work against various situations. Because from that one, we can't really gather much data, because any deck could have dealt a lot of damage in the opening turns and had strong creatures out by that point, no matter how good or bad the deck was. So let's give this hand a go. So I haven't got any white mana, but I'm hoping that the thickets will provide me with it. And there we go. So generally you'll get at least one in the next 5 cards, which perfectly suits our needs. So once I have the white mana, I'll be able to play a nice cheap blocker, and also a flyer as well, which is always handy. Even if you're not actually using it to deal damage, just having it there is often a good enough wall to slow down the enemy for a little bit. Okay. So note that I could use Declaration in Stone, but he's not really worth casting that spell on. But if more of the same name come into play, that'll definitely be worth considering. Okay, so I'm not going to get another free land out of it, but I may as well play my other creature that I can afford. While I could attack, I'd rather not lose my 2/2 in a counterattack, so we'll just wait for a turn. Okay, now that one's going to start cycling his deck, but if he does flip, he could become quite nasty, so the good thing for us is that we already have Declaration in Stone in hand, so I'm not particularly worried at this point. Tireless Tracker into play, just to start off those investigation and clue effects. Now we have 4 mana, we can also start triggering the double strike ability of Veteran Cathar as well. Oh, another one. Primary target for Declaration in Stone. 2 of the same flying creature in play at the same time. So, next round, it's definitely going to be our target if they don't flip. Oh, what am I talking about? They flip at the start of their turn, so obviously they're not going to flip beforehand. Okay, that gives us our first free investigate. Declaration in Stone. Gets rid of those flyers. And allows us to play Slayer's Plate, which we're going to use with Avacynian Missionaries. No, I still use it to defend against the 2/2 at the moment. But then that way we can exile anything that's dangerous and comes into play. And of course if nothing dangerous comes out, we'll just break the clue. To power up our Tireless Tracker. Okay, we'll take 3 damage here from the Skinner. Nothing much we can do about it. It's only a temporary buff, so still nothing really to worry about. An additional land is always handy. Gives us another investigation token. But having the missionaries out should help us a bit. And we can also break one of the clues to power him up the Tireless Tracker. And get us another card. Okay, yeah, probably will attack with a 3/3, which is correct. But that will allow me to retaliate next turn with 7 damage. Okay. So, let's see. Let's take stock at this point. So, we'll definitely want to equip Slayer's Plate. Now, we have 4 mana free. So, we can either break 2 clues, or we can put another flyer into play. But because of Declaration in Stone, we don't really want to have 2 of the same card on the field if we can avoid it. So now that we powered up a little bit, just wait for the turn to end and get rid of the 3-4. We're also going to be able to follow that up with another flip missionaries. Because we can swap Slayer's plate over to the new one. And that'll let us get rid of the 6-4 trample. Which is always handy. Getting rid of the biggest threats on the field. We can also start our attack now that we have enough mana. Oh, Reprisal's likely to get rid of the 8-6. Oh no, 6-5. Fair enough. Means I can play another one next turn. This Tireless Tracker. And what else do we want to play? Means we can play Hope Against Hope, so I'll be getting double the effect, which is always nice. 8-7. And we'll break another one just to power it up a little bit more. 9-8, there we go. Nothing fancy, but it does the job. So time to attack with an 8-6, that should be blocked by the 6-4. So we haven't particularly lost anything. We've only lost a 4-4 for a 6-4, so it's not a bad trade, and gives us a 1-1 flyer. Okay, now that 3-2 flyer comes on the field. Now the only real danger there is a few flips, so what we'll do, let's play another flyer and attack with our 10-9. Well, he doesn't have trample, he should be enough to pick off one of the creatures. Okay, there we go. Now we also want to make our flyers a little bit more powerful, because at the moment they're a bit on the weak side. So there we go, nice little 5-5. And we've also got 7-7, who can gain first strike. Now I expect he'll take a few turns to try to actually flip, but even if he does, he's only going to be 5-4, so our 5-5 can handle him. Land, another clue. Clue. And there we go. Reprisal, which is always handy, because now the Skinner is of course true his other ability, but at this point it doesn't really matter because we have that many creatures on the field and we've whittled away theirs to just the Skinner, so game is essentially over. Exactly 0 health as well. Okay, so that one was a bit closer to a real test, and I'd say it's generally effective, although it can probably be refined a little further, but it's a good starting point to base your own deck around. Okay, so that's it for Deck Builders today. And I think we're done.